My friend Brian has tasked me with finding his 2003 Porsche 986 Boxster S a new home, and it's live right now under my username on Cars and Bids, being offered with no reserve. Click the link in the description below, of course. But in getting to know this car, I went through its service history, and it comes with a thick stack of service documentation and a great corresponding spreadsheet. And in doing so, I realized this car has every piece of service documentation dating all the way back to when it was brand new. And that makes it a perfect candidate for this series. We'll find out how much it costs to own a 986 Boxster S. We'll break down the 3 most expensive years of ownership, talk about the average cost, and take a look at the average cost per mile. And then we'll find out if all of those numbers translate to the road. Let's get started. We begin this journey by talking about the 3rd most expensive year of ownership with this car, and that happened to be actually the 1st year of ownership for my friend Brian when he bought this car back in 2022 at about 78,200 miles. Of course, initially he had some registration stuff to go through, but the first piece of ownership he did came in April of that year, where he replaced the front tires with Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's. Very good taste. Those cost $482 to buy and an additional $43 to mount and balance. Not a huge deal. Then later that month, he wanted to get this car dialed in. He had it detailed, which is certainly great to see. That cost $200 again, nothing particularly serious. And then a couple months later, we get into some preventative stuff that he did with this car. So he had the brake fluid flushed, the convertible top realigned, and a general inspection performed at 80,384 miles. That came at a cost of $204. Again, not too expensive, but it's great to see a little things like that being done regularly as he was checking in on this car and making sure that it was up to snuff. In June of that year, he would do a lot of other elective stuff to this car just to kind of bring it up to his particular taste. He added a magnetic phone mount, which is still present in the car today, and he had little tiny things done. For instance, the rear fabric on the convertible top needed to be realigned. That cost $18. There are also 2 abrasion marks on either side of the convertible top. These are noted in the listing and they're pretty small, but he wanted to make sure they weren't going to get worse. So he added a patch on the inside of the convertible top on both sides for $60 in total to make sure that it wasn't going to get worse, and that of course the car remained watertight, and that is noted here. He also replaced some miscellaneous items like the gas cap and the sun visor mirror covers, which I love. That was $60 again, not a particularly large expense, but I love that level of particularity when it comes to cars. I relate to it naturally. In September of that year, Brian would have the rear sway bar drop links replaced. This was to remedy a clunking that he noticed at low speeds in the car. They were diagnosed as being worn out, and those were replaced for $75. Mechanically rounding out the year in October at 84,050 miles would come the largest service of the year. And Brian had noticed that there was slight drivetrain movement in the car when he was disengaging the clutch at low speed. That turned out to be the engine mount. So those were replaced with 987 engine mounts for a little bit more reinforcement, and they were cracked and torn, worn out, which makes sense at that mileage. In addition, he noted that with the trailing arms, the clunk was resolved, but his mechanic noted a slight oil seep on the valve cover, which we'll come back to in a minute, but that was just noted at the time and it was not replaced. The total for that service was $942. And to finish the year in December, Brian treated the car to another detail. It was clayed, it was polished and ceramic coated, and that came to $549, bringing the total for the year to $3,618, which is a decent amount of money, but for your first year with the car, to bring it up to your standards, it makes a lot of sense. You want to make sure that it is as right as rain and that you've made adjustments to make it just fit your personal preferences. So it's nice to see that all of this stuff was done. It was documented and it was done in a relatively short time frame. And Brian was using the car. That year he'd put on about 6,000 miles, which is awesome. You're supposed to use a car like this, so he was driving it, enjoying it, and bringing it up to snuff. That brings us to our 2nd most expensive year of ownership, 2016, where one of this car's most famous issues was dealt with. It applies to the 996 and the early 997s as well, and that is the IMS bearing, the intermediate shaft bearing. And it is very well known in the Porsche community that there is a design flaw with these cars related to its IMS bearing. In essence, when this bearing fails due to lack of lubrication, it can seize the engine and it's a silent killer. You don't know it's coming, just one day your engine is shot. So it's something that you want to replace proactively, and it's nice to see that it was done here. These days, it's a relatively well-known thing, and you just kind of do it as a part of a clutch service, and that's exactly what happened with this car. The IMS bearing was replaced with an LN engineering bearing. The clutch, flywheel, water pump, another common issue with these cars. Rear main seal, another common issue with these cars. Serpentine belt, thermostat, and transmission seal were all replaced. So one big service to do it all. And that total came to $4,495 back in 2014. About a month later, there were a couple of miscellaneous items. An Alpine head unit was installed along with some other audio equipment to this car. Some speaker and wiring was dealt with, a cell phone kit was installed, and the headlight switch was replaced. The total for that came to $733, so not too bad. Then in quick succession, the passenger side high beam bulb needed to be replaced, a quick $81, not too serious, bringing the total to $5,309 for 2014. Now, this was some time ago, so adjusted for inflation, that brings it to $7,405 by 2026 bucks. An expensive year, no doubt, but it's nice to see that owners were cognizant of the issues that this car can have, and they replace stuff proactively. It adds a lot of peace of mind. And that brings us to the most expensive year, and the one everyone fears who owns one of these cars. We'll get into it in just a second. The year started out innocuously enough, though, in February of 2023 with 85,960 miles. The cabin air filter and engine air filter replaced for $42. Brian installed that himself, not a huge deal. He also renewed the registration for this car. Again, just sort of something that you do. Now, Brian also likes to tinker a little bit, so I see in here that in April of that year, he ordered a Porsche alignment tool to adjust the shift cables for this car because he wasn't totally happy with the way that it was shifting. He made the adjustment, found that it did most of the work, but he wanted to have the fluid change, which he did the following month at 86,827 miles. While it was in for that, this car also got an oil service, but the transmission fluid was also replaced, and they noted that there was a slight coolant leak as well. Just stuff for him to keep in mind, but the shifting was dramatically improved. He said a 90% overall improvement, and that cost $364. Then later that month at 86,841 miles, he replaced the rear tires again with Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's. Very nice. $756 for those. Money well spent. They're the best tires money can buy, so I love seeing those in here. Those are mounted and balanced, and the car was all set to celebrate his birthday. Now, my friend Brian took this car out to a high-performance driving event out at Chuckwalla. His first time doing any sort of track day like that. The car had never been tracked in its life before that, and he learned the hard way about making mistakes on the track. Now, according to the over-rev report, there's an over-rev noted in here, but he noted that something happened when he was driving the car, and the car indicated low oil pressure at 100 degrees ambient. There was smoke on startup, an intense rattling, which only got worse on the drive home, and his mechanics suspected a spun rod bearing, which is brutal. In essence, the engine was toast in this car. But my friend Brian is not perturbed by such things because he went along the route of replacing the engine. The car wasn't scrapped to him, but not by any means. He went down the route of sourcing a new engine, which he found a 64,000 mile unit, which he had then rebuilt and refreshed. He said they split the crankcase in half and they rebuilt it with new seals, new gaskets. They inspected the cylinders, the pistons, the rings, replaced the water pump, installed another LN Engineering dual roll IMS bearing, replaced the oil scavenge pump, and did a bunch of other stuff in there while the engine was out of the car. Then, of course, the engine was installed at 87,201 miles, and a lot of stuff was replaced with that too. Of course, the serpentine belt, the air oil separator, spark plugs, fluids, brake rotors, pads front and rear. Man, it was a lot of stuff. The engine itself cost him $5,500, and this service cost him an additional $3,975, bringing it to just under $10,000 for that service alone. Now, that's an expensive way to learn your lesson about your driving limits, but ultimately my friend Brian did learn his lesson. The car hasn't seen a track since. It was a huge piece of humble pie that he had to eat, but he took care of this car and it's running beautifully now. Things like this do happen. You learn your lessons and you move on. But this car is incredible service. There are photos of the engine included with the documentation, so it's about as documented as you can get, and it gives great peace of mind knowing this engine has been serviced. The coolant leaks and stuff that had presented themselves before, well, really didn't matter anymore because now the car got a whole different engine put in it, so it kind of wiped the slate clean and reset this car completely. Moving along through the rest of the year, there's some miscellaneous things that were done. In September of that year at 87,393 miles, the air conditioning was recharged, shifter alignment was done, and the wheels are balanced. In October, the hood struts, wiper blades, and a canvas patch were installed, again, to help waterproof the top. And that came to $63, not particularly expensive. Brian installed that himself. Then an oil change was performed in November of that year at 87,988 miles. The engine oil and filter were replaced, replaced, and the engine was flushed after the rebuild. Brian wanted to make sure that everything was cleared out of there. That came to $154. And then to wrap up that year, the crank sensor was replaced. The engine was not turning over, and so that just ended up being the issue. The computer didn't know where the crank was, so it wouldn't start the car. Makes a lot of sense. Simple, ultimately, and that cost $191. And that brings the total for that year to $11,347. Now, a lot of people naturally aren't necessarily going to run into the issue of blowing their engine. However, engine replacements on these cars are not uncommon because, again, as I mentioned, if the IMS bearing fails, you can lose the motor. Now, this all happened in 2023, so it gives you a relative idea of what it would cost, absolute worst case scenario, if you need to replace one of these engines. Luckily, Brian handled it for you, so this particular car has that dealt with, but it gives a really great snapshot into what that would cost today, absolute worst case scenario. So it's nice knowing that it's done, but that is a hard pill to swallow, and I feel for my friend. With the 3 most expensive years out of the way, it's time to talk about the total cost of ownership with this car. What has it cost all of the owners over the last 23 years to own this thing? And looking at the service history, it's pretty interesting. There are some months and years where it cost basically nothing to own this car. 2011, it was $171. 2013, $152. And then, of course, there are years that are a lot more expensive. But if you add up everything, and that includes some registration costs as well, admittedly, in there, the total comes to $37,073. Now, if you divide that over 23 years, that comes to an average of $1,611.87, which is kind of what you would expect with a high-performance car. Sports cars usually cost around between $1,000 and $2,000 a year to own. That's what you should factor in. And this car sits exactly in that range. Now, if you remove the really expensive year of having to replace the engine, it brings that down to an average of $1,118.52. So that, again, does feel about right for a car like this. Fits, again, right in that $1,000 to $2,000 range. At the moment, this car's odometer shows 93,421 miles. And if you take the total cost of $37,073 divided by that number, it brings it to a total per mile cost of 40 cents per mile. Now that's, I think, relatively appropriate for a car like this. All of this makes sense and is not really a huge surprise to me. And this one appears to be very nice. So it's time to go see, is this car worth 40 cents a mile to drive? Well, let's fire it up and take it for a spin. Driving the 986 Boxster. It is unbelievable how much grip this car has. If you already watched my video where Sam and I compared the 981 Boxster Spyder to this 986 Boxster S, you know that we both walked away really liking this car. It is amazing how well this thing drives. It's so balanced and poised and just easy to use. And it delivers an experience that we decided, it doesn't mean the 981 Boxster Spyder is overvalued at being 5 times the value of this car, but that like really nice 986s feel undervalued to me. The driving experience it delivers is fantastic. And the reason I wanted to drive my friend Brian's and go through this process with him is this car is so nice. It's just so representative of what a well cared for stock 986 should be. And it delivers such a wonderful driving experience. I'm so like pleasantly surprised. It just, I mean, man, it just like how well this car drives, especially given the price point. You know, these cars are, you can get a really tired one of these for less than 10 grand. Nice ones like this regularly go in the 20 to 30 range. And like I can see why. It reminds me a little bit of the E36 M3 in a way. For a long time, those cars languished and weren't worth very much. I remember I bought my E36 M3 and M325 for, I think I paid $6,500, my friend Jeff. And now it's like really hard to find a decent one under 25. And I have a feeling the 986 Boxster might follow that trajectory because just like the E36, a lot of these were produced, a lot of them became inexpensive, became track toys, but to find really nice ones and like good colors with great maintenance history, it's just not a common sight anymore these days. And looking at the ownership costs of this thing, they're not astronomical. By performance car standards, like I mentioned, you kind of factor in $1,000 to $2,000 a year to own something fun. consumables on this are going to be more expensive than like a Miata or something along those lines, but they're not outrageous. And my poor friend Brian has been through the ringer with this car. He has experienced the absolute worst case scenario with one of these things, having to replace the engine. And even that service of buying a used unit, making sure that it was bulletproofed, was not insane. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't the most expensive thing either. And give it a second, but this little 3.2 is plenty. It's plenty powerful. I think this car also is perfect for someone who wants to learn how to drive a car quickly. It's just so balanced and forgiving. It's a great place to start if you want to get into a sports car. Now, I will say, of course, this car has a lot of early 2000s charms. Like the E36, the build quality of the interior of this car is not the finest. There are a lot of hard plastics and things like that. It's got some kind of oddities. The steering wheel is quite large. But all of those things are to say, I kind of like some of the quirks. The shape of the shifter always perplexed me. It is such an odd looking thing. It's kind of fun. I don't know. I just enjoy it. I'm nostalgic about cars of this era. It's not slow. That was a pretty decent speed. But the beauty of this car is that you get to use all of its power. I think it makes 258 horsepower, which is not a ton, but you get to use and enjoy all of it. And if you live somewhere, you're lucky enough to live somewhere like I do, where you can have the roof down, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And this car, again, is totally stock. I suspect with a little exhaust work, you could make this thing really sing. But it just makes easy work of everything. You just stay on the throttle, turn the wheel, and its capabilities are so high. To me, it's very easy to see why this car became the darling of a lot of track days. They're affordable to get into. There's a lot of support for them, and they're pretty capable, potent little cars. And I really like everything about. I love the way the shifter feels. All the work that my friend Brian did to dial it in, it shows. It shifts beautifully. The brakes are progressive. You push through them. They're definitely of their time, but they work very effectively. Again, there's not much mass to have to slow down, which is nice. The chassis dynamics are fantastic. It's great to drive a purpose-built sports car that was built to be a convertible from the very beginning. It definitely shows. The intent of this car really shows. And the suspension is beautifully judged too. The thing about this car is, despite it being 23 years old with 93,426 miles on it now, you could still use this thing every single day, especially if you live somewhere where having a convertible is certainly at a premium. It just feels so refined. And I think that's one of the big things that I like about it. Of course, the Miata is always the answer. But if you want a mid-engine experience, I mean, in this price range, it just exists in a category kind of all its own. And even at low speed, just huck it into a corner, and I'm barely touching the capabilities of this car. You can just go so much, you can carry so much more momentum and speed than everybody in front of you. Whoa. It is so capable. It's just like the tighter and more twisty the road, the happier the car is. This is not a car you want to take on a road that has long sweepers. That's not where it's at its most pleasurable to use. This car wants tight technical stuff. It wants to work. It wants you to really use all the dynamics of the car. And it's just amazing. Even if I just wrench it, it's so compliant and forgiving and predictable and easy. You can just, this car is really, really something. I'm so impressed. And so that kind of sums it up. If you're looking for a 986 you know all of these things already. I think these cars deserve to be talked about more. I think they deserve to be respected a lot more and valued by the market too, especially in like nice condition, because so many Boxsters are just beat these days. But it's such a pleasure to use one that isn't, and has been maintained by somebody who shares my affinity for doing it right and documenting everything. I highly respect that, and I can't wait for the next owner to pick up this car. I think they will love it just as much as my friend Brian did, and certainly just as much as I do. It's a good little car. And that is how much it costs to own a Porsche 986 Boxster S. Some years are really expensive, and other years aren't that bad. Regardless, all of the service history from this car's past does translate to the road and how this thing drives, which is the most important part of any Porsche. And if you've been in the market for a 986 Boxster, well, you can give this car a new home through Cars and Bids. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you very soon. Goodbye.